It's like as we sort of parse through how to be a civil society, which obviously this regime does not want us to be civil. They would love a civil war. So it's almost like a revolutionary act to be respectful and joyful and hopeful, right? But so I it's not like, oh, like roll over and do nothing. But it's like I do think that the more we dig in, us and them, the less productive it ultimately will be.
Welcome to the Practivist Pod, the practice of activism made practical.
Today, Jess is coming to us from DC with virtually every other left-leaning video content creator in America. If it's slow on TikTok, that's why. She reports back on some great speeches and brings us a very special interview with none other than Pete Buttigieg.
That's right. And then Steve talks about the importance of the arts in activism, especially in the face of authoritarianism, with actor and activist Amy Brenneman. I'm Jessica Craven.
I'm Steve Pearson.
Hold on. Stay strong. It won't be long. Yeah, yeah. We will build a better world.
What are you doing in DC, Jess? Where are you? I don't recognize that room.
I know. This is my my shishi hotel room. I'm at a place called the Salamander Hotel in Washington, D.C. And I'm at a convention called Trending Up, which is for content creators. We jokingly said that every left-leaning content creator in America is here, but it's not really a joke. Like, if they wanted to just get rid of the entire left-leaning online ecosystem, they could, like, bomb the building right now, and
Yikes.
there would just be nothing. There'd be nothing left. They're not going to do that.
Well, this show comes out on Thursday, so we're recording this early. So by the time this comes out, if anyone hears this, they're gone. They've left the hotel. They've left the building.
I mean, It's like everybody is down there. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's everybody that I see in my little For You scroll. They're like all down there, and it's fun. They're really very, very nice, smart people. So it's kind of been a blast. They're bringing us together to talk about, how to fight the right wing online sphere, if you want to call it that. So that's what I'm up to.
So important. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but it's so important. We have to keep talking about it. The right wing absolutely owns the alternative media space. They have for a long time. The GOP literally invests in these content creators on the right. And, we saw the repercussions of that in the last election. And so I'm glad events like this exist. And like we talked about last week, also, groups like even the DNC and congressional groups really leaning into this space, finding opportunities to engage with influencers and content creators and get out of the traditional media bubble.
Yeah. We were listening to, I think it was Maxwell Frost, who came and spoke to us yesterday. And he said that he was talking to some audience somewhere, and it was, I think, younger people. And he said, how many of you get your news, or maybe it was Elizabeth Warren. We heard from a lot of people. Anyway, how many of you get your news from cable or from TV? And they were like, not a single person in the room raised their hand. And if they are seeing it, it's something that's been clipped from cable and put on social media. But yeah, people are not getting their news on TV. So that they are, for better or for worse, they're getting it on social media. And so, yes, I think it's very encouraging. One wishes that Democrats had maybe done this a little earlier, but at least they're doing it. And the Trending Up this year is even, I think, better than last year. This is the second year they're doing it, but last year it was like a lot of political content creators, people like me, quite frankly. But this year it's people like me, but also people who are, lifestyle influencers or do comedy. I mean, they had some of that last year, but they're branching out because that's what the right has done.
Yeah.
Like, they're doing culture podcasts, they're doing movie podcasts. And so I think the left is also starting to realize, like, we need to bring everybody who's even remotely left-leaning in and really encourage them to be messaging on their, like, cooking, videos, because that's where people are getting their political information.
Yeah. I love
like it or
that.
not.
You
Yeah.
add a little bit of salt and pepper, do a garlic rub. Oh, and by the way, Hegseth needs to fucking resign and then cook this chicken for 30 minutes on low
That's
heat.
right. That's right. That's right. Yep. Stir and then talk about Tulsi Gabbard and how she's also using messaging apps she shouldn't be using. That's the latest news. Stir some more. Stir that stew. Stir that
Just
stew.
keep stirring.
Yeah.
Just keep stirring, and more comfort food too. More carbs
exactly.
for everybody.
Yep.
Well, that's really great. I'm glad you're there representing, and you also, I'm sure, talked about a lot of what's going on, or heard from the speakers like Elizabeth Warren and others about what's going on in Congress and the fights. I think notably what I'd like to talk about is the Medicaid fight that's happening right now. You know, I think when that vote happened for the budget, a lot of people, we've been trying to counter this on our show, but a lot of people really thought it's over. This budget's passed. It was just the beginning. Right. There's been a big fight. And, because of all the calls that, that our listeners and everyone else has made to these offices, there's Republicans who are, you know, backing away from it, not showing up, not wanting to vote. They're hearing about it in town halls. And now Speaker Mike Johnson has said that the vote will be delayed, probably after Memorial Day, maybe even longer. I think it was you that said delays are a beautiful thing, because it gives us the opportunity to slam more pressure on these Republicans. They're really feeling it. So, this fight is not over.
No, not at all. And it's, what I heard in the very beginning of this process was that there's this great organization, the Progressive, God, I can't remember. It's called Unrig the Rules is the newsletter they write. And they were saying, when you look at past Republican reconciliation bills and Democratic too, when they're trying to pack a whole bunch of stuff into these reconciliation bills, their success is tied to how long it takes them to get them through. The shorter they make it, the more likely their success. Like, Trump's tax cut bill last time was done very, very quickly. So, but the ACA fight, if we remember, was drawn out. And by the end, we were able to kill it because voters have time to get the information. So that's what's happening right now, is that we are able to get this information out to enough voters that they've been screaming at their lawmakers enough that lawmakers are starting to say, we can't vote for these Medicaid, like not all of them. So now, they're trying to figure out if there are any Medicaid cuts that they can vote for. And then if they don't vote for Medicaid cuts, then the deficit hawks, those Republicans who gotta have those cuts, are going to be mad because they're not getting enough cuts. So they're fighting with each other right now, which is where we want them to be.
Yeah.
Right?
And they've been there. Some of them have been here before and remember what happened in 2018. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of stuff that happened that led to the blue wave in 2018, but at the center of it was the fight to protect our health care. And the Republican effort to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, sent Republicans out of their seats and lost them their seats. And notably, here in California, David Valadao, voted to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, lost his seat in the 2018 election. And then he was able to get it back. And he has a tenuous hold on it now, but he didn't vote this last time around for the reconciliation bill. He just decided not to vote. And there's been some chatter that he's talking to his colleagues because he knows what happened last time when they went hard on this. They lost their seats. So it's working. The pressure is working. And, you know, there's nothing more important than saving our health care. And it's that simple. And I'll talk about it a little bit later in the reason for hope. But, today all day, don't fuck with Medicaid has been trending on X. So that's pretty much it. People don't fuck with our health care. People don't like that. All political stripes. Everyone wants to have a right to health care when they need it.
And it's really just so practical on so many different levels, because when you start to cut away at Medicaid, you are tanking the economy around the people who lose their health insurance. So it's not only the tens of millions of people who lose their health insurance, but then it's their families going into medical debt. And then it's the towns, where those citizens have less money to spend. It's the hospitals that are shutting down. Like, it's just dumb. And I think that Americans are very tuned into the fact that there is no good reason for this. Like, when the reason to do it is to give tax cuts to people who already have more money than they'll ever be able to spend, it's just, it's vile. And I think Americans can see it. They may not know all of the ins and outs of the budget, like exactly which parts of the, FMAP and, all these technical terms, but they know, like, cutting healthcare for poor people to give tax cuts to rich people is gross. It's really that simple.
Yeah. And so many more people rely on Medicaid than really realize it. It's seniors, obviously, in-home care, nursing homes, people with disabilities really depend on it. Children.
Lots of children. Yeah.
Lots of children.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we talk about this a lot, but, hospitals, healthcare centers that will go out of business, and create healthcare deserts. And one fundamental thing to remember, and this goes, like, I think both of us are Medicare for all fans. We believe in a single payer, system. When people are uninsured, we're not saving money. It costs us so much more, because when an uninsured person shows up at the hospital, the doctors don't say, no, you don't have insurance, we're not going to treat you. They treat them. Right. And then that cost has to be paid for somewhere else, and it comes usually out of the taxpayers. So it ends up being more expensive to handle, uninsured folks than insured folks. So anyway, we could go on and on about healthcare, but it's a good thing that people need to be, shouting from the rooftops, because fundamentally, it's that simple. Don't take away our health care. That's what the Republicans are trying to do. And that's what across party lines people don't want to happen.
Right. And make sure that if you have a Republican lawmaker, make sure that when you talk to their staffers, because their staffers are going to feed you the same misinformation that their bosses are trying to feed to everybody. Oh, well, we're only talking about getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. That's not true. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to get rid of Medicaid expansion, which is an ACA program that gives insurance to 20 million Americans who are living at 138% of the poverty line, which is $45,000 a year for a family of four. You try living on that. That's insane, right? So that's what they want to cut. And then they're just using this waste, fraud, and abuse line just to cover blatant cuts. And then the other thing, and then we can move on. But the other thing they're going to try is work requirements. And I was actually on a panel today, and I asked, I was like, how do we talk about this in a way that people can understand? And one of the guys up there said, it's basically drowning people in paperwork to make them fall off of their health care. And that is exactly what it is. Everybody who is able-bodied who is on Medicaid, almost without exception, is already working. And if they're not, it's because they're the prime caregiver for somebody else. But what happens when you do these work requirements is that people drown in paperwork, and then they fall off of their insurance. And then again, becomes more expensive for everybody. So don't let them fool you with work requirements. Don't let them fool you with waste, fraud, and abuse, because that's not what this is about. This is about making cuts here to give tax cuts to rich people over here. Very simple.
Here we go. Keep it simple. Yeah. Love it.
Keep it simple.
That was the drum sounds for those of you who are listening and not watching us.
If you were watching, you wouldn't have been able to tell either, because I've never played drums, so I'm just waving my hands around aimlessly.
We're explaining all of our movements anyway as we go. So, so something we don't have to explain, though, and is the great work that you all are doing. We talk about these town halls, but I just want to, before we move on, talk about this incredible town hall and Emily Feiner, who asked a pretty reasonable question to Mike Lawler.
Yeah, Lawler.
Mike Lawler, about how he can call himself a moderate, how he can consider himself a moderate when he's going along with everything that this regime does. And this 64-year-old semi-retired social worker who had previously worked for the Department of Veteran Affairs, and notably, it's not a Democrat. It's not registered with either political party, was dragged out of there by security. And I'm sure a lot of people saw the video. We'll put it up here too, for folks to look at. But, another hero standing up and like really dumb thing for Mike Lawler. And you also mentioned she's, Jewish too, and, has been vocal about that. And not a good look for,
it's not a good look. Not a good look. Yeah. And she, by the time he dragged her out, if you haven't seen the video, she's sitting quietly in her seat. Like, she's not agitating. She's not yelling. And they say, you have to leave. And she's saying, I'm an old Jewish lady. Just leave me alone. I'm not leaving. And they literally like pick this woman up. There's probably 6 guys there. Pick her up by her arms and her legs. I mean, it is obscene. It's obscene. And why they did it, I just don't understand. Like, there's no upside for them in getting this up on social media, which now it's like gone viral on social media.
Yeah.
Mike Lawler is in a district he won by, I don't know, maybe you know, Steve, you're better with this stuff, but like not a lot.
I should, but very, very close. He is in a tight district, which is why he tries to paint himself as a moderate, and she, called him out for that.
Yeah, moderates also don't have people carried out of town halls. Like, when have you seen a moderate do that? That's not a moderate thing to do.
Not since
that is
late
a Marjorie
1930s
Taylor
Germany.
Greene. Yeah, no, this is just not moderate. And not to mention, I have family members in that district. I think we talked about it last week, but they're not even allowed to film in there. And you can hear in the background of this movie that as the person is filming the cops carrying her friend or relative out, another woman is yelling at her to stop filming the whole time. Like, the whole thing is it's so repressive. It's so, it's very messed up. It's disturbing. No free speech, no filming, no free speech. Yeah. You can't say what you want. You can't do what you want. These are the Republicans who claim to be all about freedom. It's shocking to me.
Well, the best thing that we can do in the face of that kind of repression is to stand up and make our voices heard even louder. And that's what Emily Feiner did. And I'm grateful for that, for everyone else who is showing up, because when we stop doing that, that's when we're really in trouble, so. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm so curious about your interaction with Mayor Pete, or Secretary Pete, I should say. And your interview, how did that come out? You want to prep this, and then we'll play the interview.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I haven't even seen the interview yet, so I hope it's not, I'll tell you what happened, and it wasn't just me. Every creator who got to interview him, like, it's so nerve-wracking. I was told a day or two before, they emailed me and said, you've been picked as one of, we're going to have a few creators. He's going to come and speak, and then we're going to have him do little 4-minute interviews with a few content creators, and you're one of them. Which I was, first of all, what an honor. And I was completely floored. But, they've got this studio room set up. There's like 3 or 4 people in there with his staff, and everybody's watching. And I had a couple questions prepped, but like, when you then meet Pete Buttigieg and sit in a chair where your legs are almost touching, I can't tell you, Steve, it's like I started asking him my questions, and every time he would answer, my brain would just go bzzz, because I was just thinking like, Pete Buttigieg, I'm talking to Pete Buttigieg. I couldn't think. It was very hard to be relaxed. And it wasn't just me. Everybody who interviewed with him was like, oh my God, it's really
well, the
intense.
setting, the time constraint and everything, that's really hard. Like when I do interviews for the podcast, obviously I've got all this time to prep and it's a more relaxed setting. But I definitely felt that way when I interviewed Stacey Abrams. She's the one that really had me spinning, when I interviewed her.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've been watching these people on TV, and you've seen them on social media, and Pete Buttigieg, I have a huge politics crush on that guy, as do many people. And so, yes, it probably looks really awkward. We'll see. But I had other content creator friends who had even more awkward things happen with other lawmakers, which I won't go into. But it's just awkward when you're suddenly there with like a famous person. But it's great. He seems great. He seems so smart. And you'll see in the interview. He seems great.
Without further ado, let's take a look at the interview.
That was a drum roll.
I know. You did it again.
Yep. It is a thrill to meet you. genuinely like a delight and an honor. I want to start by telling you that I posted a bit of your podcast content after you did your famous recent podcast, and obviously people blown away by the things that you were saying, the vision that you were putting forth, but also by the beard. And I just want to say that people love the beard. I'm sure you've heard this. And it is a very sort of, it feels very like almost Abraham Lincoln-esque to me. No, not that long and not the hat, but like, I just love it. I think it's great. You look really good. And I wanted to ask, just because I am an Abraham Lincoln fan, and this is a way for me to like segue into talking to you, like, who's your favorite president in history?
So it's Lincoln, for sure.
It is Lincoln.
Yeah, I know sometimes it feels obvious, but it's also just true. I mean, what other president has had to face half of the country breaking off and declaring war against the other half? Something we should remember when we think about how unprecedented our times feel, is just how much our country has come up against. And he's somebody who thought forward. I mean, while holding the country together in the Civil War, he oversaw the Transcontinental Railroad, what would become the National Science Foundation. I mean, really profound, forward-looking things to make our country better off. Yeah. He read, he thought. Yeah. I think of all the things he said, maybe my favorite is when he said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I would spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. And I think about that all the time.
Fantastic. I've not heard that one.
I hope that's true. I've definitely heard it.
Well, even if it's not, it's a really good, it's a good quote. My husband is a woodworker, so he would very much like that and appreciate that. And he prayed and he struggled a lot with faith, I think, and what he was doing. And what I love about him is that he, obviously there were no polls. Yeah. He really trusted his inner guidance and did things that he felt were right even when they were popularly opposed. I always tell people, like, not everybody approved of what he did at all. Yeah. And it, in its own way, there was sort of a Fox News-ish culture then, too, in the newspapers, right? Yeah, so, for sure. Anyway, so thank you for that. I love history. I think American history is important for us to understand and read about. So that was great. So I have a trans teenager. I'm a mom, and that's a big part of the reason I do what I do. A great kid, MJ. And when I told MJ that I would be talking to you today, I said, well, if you could ask Pete Buttigieg one question, what would you ask him? And they said, I guess I would like to know, I've seen this, 100 days of Trump. This, I think we could all argue, the worst 100 days historically, right, of any presidential administration in terms of lack of accomplishments and destructiveness. Yeah. What does the opposite of that look like? Right? Like, so let's say you're a president, or I don't want to put, you in any uncomfortable position, but like, let's say we've got a great Democratic president who comes in after this, with all of the wreckage, but also who wants to do more than just fix what we had, as you just talked about, but create something new.
I think
what does that look like?
I think that's the question.
It is.
Substantively and politically, it's not enough to just be saying no. There's a lot to say no to right now. Right. But the real question to me is, how do we build a more robust sense of freedom in this country, of empowerment, democratic empowerment for people, where we're not just the playthings of a small number of ultra-rich people, one of whom happens to be the president, but rather better positioned to live lives of our choosing. And it turns out it really matters what our government does and how it's shaped in terms of whether we in our everyday lives are more free, whether our families are supported. And I could talk about that in terms of policies, wanting to see paid family leave or a higher minimum wage or some of the other things I think we need to do in terms of law and regulation. But I also think we need leadership that calls us into a shared project. There's a shared sense that what we've had isn't working. Right. There should be a shared sense that we're all part of building something different and better. Right. And I really believe that that's possible. Yeah. I think that we need to organize our imagination around the reality that sooner or later a day will come when Donald Trump is not the president of the United States. Right. Yeah. He will not be politically active in the United States 10, 20 years from now. Right. And then from that, solve back to what we would build instead. And the answer cannot be, let's just put everything back the way it was. Right. The New Deal systems that we inherited, the post-Cold War or the post-World War II systems that we inherited, they're done. And that could be okay if we have a sense of what we'd rather put in their place. So you're thinking not getting rid of things like Social Security, obviously, Medicaid, but like building on those, expanding them. Yeah, or building on top of the reimagining them for a different future. Look, nobody was worried about climate change, let alone artificial intelligence.
Right.
When we set up, to me, what's really important about artificial intelligence for the near term is what it's going to do to labor markets. This is an even bigger shock to labor markets and to our everyday assumptions about what it's like to have a job than the Great Depression was.
Right.
So,
Yep.
yeah, we need to protect and strengthen Social Security. That's not enough of an answer.
Right.
To what is about to happen to millions and millions of American workers. By the way, up and down the economic ladder.
Time for one more question. Okay. Now we'll go back to, because again, I'm a mom, and this is a big part of why I do what I do. And you've got young kids, and I'm just curious, and this is from a total mom's perspective. What's your favorite kids book? What is the book that you and your kids like when they're like, Papa, that's what they call you? Papa, read me something? And I know you should say Chasten's book, because I know Chasten has a new book out, and it's amazing. And
they do
great.
love it. Yeah, it's called Papa's Coming Home. It's this very sweet story. And so many reasons that's
your answer. Yeah.
My best answer I can give. But we're always finding new books. There's one that Chasten brought home called The Rabbit Listened, which is a really sweet, nice book that I'm really taken with. But we're also doing the classics right now. We're doing Peter Rabbit, and we're getting into a Dr. Seuss kick.
Dr. Seuss is great.
It was great because I don't remember why those were. I don't remember the plot of Cat in the Hat.
Yeah.
I do now because I read it because the kids demand it almost every day. But it's fun to go back to that stuff. There's so much good stuff out there, and yeah, I'm proud of Chasten for adding to the options.
I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's really a genuine pleasure. And I just love you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Amazing.
Well,
That was so great.
yeah, he's as I said, super smart guy, and he's got a lot to say. He's got a lot of thoughts about a forward vision for our country. And I'm just going to say it here. I'm pretty convinced he's going to run in 2028. So I just think he is.
Well, I think that's probably a pretty good guess, especially since he said he's not going to run for Senate.
Right.
He does probably want another job in politics. So
yeah. And he's going to Iowa next week. I mean, who does that? Right?
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, you got to
Not
keep
that
your
Iowa
eyes
isn't
peeled
a
on
beautiful
Iowa,
place,
as
you
always.
guys. Iowa's great, but
no one goes to Iowa unless they're running for president.
Politicians tend to go there for, that reason. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely winning the messaging war right now. I mean, there's no one doing it better than Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
And it comes from, I mean, you all just saw it, but it comes from such a real place, just of knowledge and who he is, and very impressive.
Yeah, very impressive guy. The last thing I'll say about this is someone was telling me that they were reading the comments on the podcast he was on, the sort of right-wing podcast he went on, the name of which is eluding me right now, but it's it's like a 2.5-hour recording, and she listened to the entire thing, and then she read the comments, and she was like, these guys were so complimentary towards him, and these are guys who are not our people usually, and they guys on the right, they can see him, it's very encouraging, because if they're okay with him and even liking him and sort of agreeing with what he's saying, it's very hopeful that we might be able to pull some of them in to support him if he were to run. And I mean, there's lots of exciting candidates, but I love Mayor Pete.
Interesting.
I guess we can't call him now. He's Secretary Pete, right? That's what we call him now.
Yeah. Yep. I've still got my Pete Buttigieg mug.
Oh, do you?
I collected all of them from 2020.
That was smart.
I got mugs from all the candidates.
That was smart. Because it's one of them is going to come back and be relevant later. That was good. Good move.
And then I have the primary mug. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was good.
All right. What's your reason for hope this week,
I have
Jess?
such a good one. So we got phenomenal news, I believe yesterday, which is that it looks like we have finally won this goddamn case in North Carolina, which has been going on forever. I can't even summarize it except to say that We won a Supreme Court race there, Allison Riggs, right? We won it by about, 732 votes. And this was a hard-fought race. As someone who was canvassing there before the election, we worked very hard to get those votes for her. We won that seat, and then the guy she was running against decided that he was going to contest it and fight to get certain ballots thrown out, and it has been going on for 6 months. And it was one of those things that we kept hearing, if they succeed at this, then democracy is over. It's really been being painted in a very dire light that, if this succeeds, this is going to be a playbook that Republicans are going to do over and over again. And in the end, I believe it was a Trump-appointed judge just basically said, no, this is not happening. Now, I think he is going to appeal, but it seems to be, the general consensus seems to be that it's very unlikely to be taken up on appeal, and everyone's feeling very optimistic that maybe we have actually won. Huge deal.
Huge.
The courts once again have done what they were supposed to do. Big deal.
It's been a big week for the courts, actually, in general, and this massive letter with something like 120 different judges, signing on to a letter, both, conservative appointees and liberal appointees, to Pam Bondi to admonish the arrest of that judge and the attack on judges in general, and the way that they're approaching all this lawlessness. It's been very encouraging. And I was saying before we were recording, I have a friend who runs an organization that was getting ready to invest all this money and send all these people to North Carolina to do ballot curing and all this stuff. And it's looking like they don't have to do that. So that's great news.
And the fact that it's Trump-appointed judges, it's just...
Yeah, exactly.
Icing on the icing. It's fantastic. Yeah. So, and what's your good news, Steve?
Well, I'm stealing one from you, which is that Brian Kemp has announced that he's not going to be running for Senate in Georgia, which is really great. And thanks for, reminding me of that, because I saw that and it was a huge blow for the GOP in Georgia, because there really isn't another super strong GOP candidate. Brian Kemp, obviously former governor, and also former Secretary of State, who threw a bunch of voters off the rolls, and which led to Stacey Abrams not getting elected when she probably should have been elected. He's, but very popular, with Republican voters, and a popular guy, and has managed, despite that, because he pushed back on the 2020 voter fraud claims, has managed to kind of be viewed as a moderate or someone who's somewhat reasonable. He would have made for a formidable Senate candidate, and so it's a relief that he's not running, and we'll see who else steps up, but that was a big blow. And kind of just the reason for it is why so many of these Republicans are starting to sit on their hands, back off from the budget fight and cuts to Medicaid, as we talked about, and then just decide they don't want to run, is because, they're seeing the writing on the wall. They're seeing the public sentiment, right? There's what happens in the halls of Congress, but then there's what happens out in the streets with the people. And, they're seeing that rise. They're seeing us rise. They're seeing us use our voices. And Brian Kemp wants none of that. He's like, nope. I can be a consultant, make much more money, and just hang out with my family and don't have to deal with this bullshit. So,
right. And also, I think Brian Kemp has just the tiniest bit of integrity. He did stand up to Trump, and he did refuse to do. I don't like the guy. I don't agree with him on most things, but
you give him that, sure.
You want to give him that he did do that, and I think he's looking at the situation and just going, I'm going to have to completely sell myself out. You can't be a Republican in Congress right now and have any moral compass at all. No. And I think he's just not, he doesn't want to do it. And what I'm hearing is that Republicans are having a really hard time recruiting good candidates, because the good ones don't want to be a part of this. They see that this is a sinking ship. It may take a while to sink, but they're like, I don't know. I don't want to. This is in the long run, this will not be good for me, and I don't want to be part of it. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what gives me hope. We've talked about it a lot. I do think that's a sinking ship. I know that we will get through this. I don't know when that ship is going to fully be submerged. But
let's put some more holes in it quickly, please.
Yeah, exactly. But we're doing the work. Yeah. The hull is compromised. And thanks to all the work that you all are doing and activists like Amy Brenneman, I think we're going to get there hopefully soon. But coming up is our interview with actor and activist Amy Brenneman. Amy Brenneman is an actor, activist, and fierce advocate for democracy and progressive issues. She's best known for her work on NYPD Blue, Judging Amy, which she also co-created and produced, Heat, Private Practice, and most recently, The Old Man. I know her from literally being at every canvas, rally, and or meeting that she can physically show up to. So, Amy, thank you for showing up for this. It's so nice to see you.
So nice to see you too. I know. And I remember your campaign very well too. That was an awesome night at the house.
I was so appreciative and honored that you supported that. And it was so cool to have you there. So thank you for that too. And I really do admire how you show up not just to lend your name and platform as a surrogate, but you also just go knock on doors and make phone calls for campaigns. You've been a longtime advocate for a lot of democratic causes, including abortion access, common sense gun laws, even advocating for the Department of Peace. So you know how hard this work can be, and you've had your share of wins and losses along the way. How do you stay resilient doing this work? What do you do?
Well, I'm just sort of better on my feet and in the world than I think, especially now with the way that we consume news in a 24/7 cycle, usually by ourselves with our devices. It's very isolating, honestly. So when there's an opportunity to show up somewhere physically, my body's really happy. My body and always I'm more cheerful and cheered in the world than the places I go in my head. That's and I also think it's a way to quite literally metabolize ideas and thoughts and fears and news items, right? It's like I just finished this wonderful play by this playwright Larissa Fasthorse, and it was not really a political farce, but I would say a farce about identity politics. It's about stuff that we don't usually laugh at, and we did it in Washington D.C., a mile from the Capitol,
at Arena Stage, right? Yeah,
at Arena Stage, yeah. And I was so grateful, but also it was a great experience, and it's always a lot of fun to do a play, but it wasn't a farce, like, as much as I love like A Noise Is Off, like something funny that takes you away from a present situation. It very much is really about the world that we live in, including some rewrites since January. But it is a farce. I mean, she has that kind of comedic sensibility. And, a couple months ago, I knew it. I just couldn't stop doom scrolling. I just was like, and so quite literally, this play helped me metabolize the news of the day, just the way you metabolize meal, and make something from it, and build community, right? So I think that at the core of it, I may know what I think is the best idea for a certain issue or a certain candidate or a certain whatever. But ultimately, when I come together with other people, it's this most salient, nourishing thing is the community building, right? And then the community itself may move in a way that I didn't anticipate, or I may even disagree with, right? But it's almost like what happens is secondary to this feeling of solidarity and community of care, which I take very seriously. Yeah.
I obviously couldn't agree with that more. And we talk on this show all the time about how important it is to be in community with each other. We did a lot of great digital organizing during the, COVID, but we lost so much of that, ability to do a kickoff at a campaign office and feel that excitement together. So I believe in that. And as you know, my wife is an actor and I worked in the entertainment industry for a long time. And I believe very strongly in the power of the arts and artists and storytellers, especially in these moments. I mean, always, but especially in these moments. And there's you kind of led me right to my next question that I wanted to ask you, talking about what you were just doing on the arena stage, because there's a reason that authoritarian regimes attack the arts and try to suppress artists. It's right out of the fascist playbook. And it's chilling to see Trump take over the Kennedy Center, try to defund PBS, and now, I'm sure you saw, wants to impose tariffs on foreign films that, quote unquote, spread propaganda. Can you talk about how important artists and storytellers are in the face of authoritarianism?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's like there's a freedom to it, and my son went to Coachella and he was like sending me these pictures of like thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are so happy to be there. And I don't know how those people voted or if they voted or whatever, right? But there's this thing, that
there's probably there needs to be some good data on Coachella goers and their voting habits. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, listen, art making creates empathy, right? Which authoritarians don't like. It creates these bonds. I mean, it's like I have a lot of musician friends. It's like if you have somebody who's a great drummer, it's like, I don't know who you voted for. I don't care if but I think that there's this humanity, there's this shared humanity, right? And so if there's anything we know about authoritarians, it's like they want to dehumanize, right? They want to have somebody not appear as human, right? So then they can, I don't know, it's just like so sick and sadistic. I mean, I've always been a really sensitive tyke when it comes to like bullying and schoolyard brawls, where I was never involved with them, but even just being around it, it's, by the way, it's not that I'm such a sensitive, I mean, I am sensitive, but it's not that I'm a shrinking violet. I mean, I can get into it with I'm unafraid of confrontation, but I just think what we're seeing now is sadism, right? And what we're seeing now is a certain pleasure in the cruelty. And I don't think most people, and that same thing, like I think children have to be taught racism. I think children have to be taught, to be cruel to one another. I think your natural inclination is to help somebody out and hopefully that they'll help you out, right? I mean, it's this kind of, so I think I just think it's outside the bounds of politics is honestly what I feel. And I think that Trump and his regime want to control everything. And, I'm more cheered now than I was like 3 months ago, because my biggest fear, I mean, I have lots of fears, but my biggest fear at that time was that people would just be afraid to show up, right? That somehow it would be, and I spoke at the People's March on the Boston Common the weekend before the inauguration. And I had this kind of waking, fretful dream that like, my husband and my daughter and I were the only ones on the common, and I showed up and there were lots of folks,
Yeah, a lot.
But I will say there's more and more and more people every time I go out. And that's the really good news. It's not like there was a big chunk in January and everybody's gotten freaked out. I think that we're being wise. I think, I asked Jamie Raskin's, a buddy of mine, in February, I was like, hey, is it time for one big march, And he said, you know what? I don't want any call for, God forbid, there's a bad actor or there's a false flag, and you have to bring in the whatever the martial law, So I think we're learning how to protest in this moment. We're learning, and there's more and more and more people, and there's more and more humor, and there's also more and more art. There's like brass bands and dancers, and I was at this thing on Capitol Hill, and there was this puppet. I was like, I want to do puppets. Like people are not afraid to poke fun, which also strong men don't like.
Right.
We use humor. We use lots of things.
I think that's what's, the role of farce, of satire, of all of that to we can take the strong men down a peg, which they hate, but also, it's a tricky way to bring people in that aren't thinking about things a certain way. And we're so closed off from each other. Our political messaging, is so siloed. But when you can have a shared experience of a show, a movie, a play, theater, whatever it is, music, as you said, that brings us together. And I think about it. I love your example of the drummer, the good drummer. I think about like Sly and the Family Stone and how that was one of the bands that was like a fully integrated band, and the example that just gave of like, being yourself, making music together. And I love that. And also the bullying thing. I was talking to Melinda, my wife, earlier this morning, and Trump really seems to be pandering to the waffle belly crowd, right? The folks who think it's hilarious to give someone a waffle belly and to inflict pain on someone. And that's funny. And, we're getting too deep now, but as the recipient of a waffle belly, I don't appreciate that when I was younger.
No, and it's like, well, of course you'd want Fred Rogers or you'd want Sesame Street off, because that teaches tolerance and curiosity and mutual support and
kindness, diversity. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like these really basic stuff that, growing up, if your kid, I don't care where the school is, if your kid was in a kindergarten class and the teacher was like, yeah, let's pick on that guy. Yeah, all of us, let's pick on that. You'd go, no, something's terribly wrong, right? So I think it's the values that we instill. And it's funny, even the, being a freelancer and working in the movie industry and seeing certain movie stars that are want to rule through, intimidation, basically, and then those that are, then you got the Jeff Bridges and the John Lithgows that are just, magnificent leaders, and part of what makes them magnificent is their support and love for other people. And then you want to do, it's just literally the opposite. So I think we're looking at some really core psychological and sociological dynamics. And it's funny. I was really, I don't know if this means I'm like prescient or worrywart, but I've seen this in my own psychology in the past. When I felt the drum beats of this thing, so for me, my little stations of the cross were Amy Coney Barrett getting in there under the shadow of night,
Right.
Certainly Jan 6th, Dobbs, it's like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Supreme Court immunity thing.
Right.
I was terrified.
Yeah.
And I still am. But there are a lot of people and institutions pushing back. And the more there are, the more there, I got, today what's going on is all the NEA stuff, right? So I was on the Hill about 2 weeks ago to advocate for the NEA. So
you keep perfectly segueing into my questions, because I was going to ask you about that too. And I saw that you were there with Creative Coalition and a bunch of our friends, like you put an Instagram post on, and Melinda was like, why aren't we there? That's all of our friends. Like Gina Belafonte is a close friend. And Melinda did a show with Alan Ruck and Chickless and Dean Norris and Jason Isaacs and all those guys. But
I'm going to text Robin Bronk, right?
But tell us about what you were doing and the Creative Coalition.
Yeah, the Creative Coalition advocates for arts funding, arts and education, and specifically the NEA. And so we had this kind of retreat in February in anticipation of going to the Hill. And, the NEA funding, first of all, it's minuscule compared to every other country. We don't really support the arts on a federal level, but it's more the idea that, this is an important, thing to do as a culture. So what's confusing in general, and I also work for 504 Medicaid stuff, and because my daughter has a disability. So you have like today, I have 4 different theater companies that I work with said, like, oh, I got an email, like, we're out, $25,000. Like, we were literally mid-production and stuff. That is actually illegal, right? Because this budget was passed by Congress long before Trump was even elected. It was like last October, right? Now, Trump, as usual, likes to do things and then, sort of like the governor of Maine, and then quietly, like, he loses.
Yeah.
So technically,
He's been losing
those
a lot, too.
programs, South Coast Rep, I think was 50,000, whatever it is, that actually can be clawed back. I mean, it's a drag. But what it indicates is, like, in 2026, NEA is going to be gone altogether. So it's two sort of calls that I'm going to make when I hang up with you. And, every day my calls are a little different. Usually, Jess Craven tells me who to call.
Jess was sorry not to be here for this interview, by the way.
She's in DC,
she's
right?
actually in DC right now. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think what's interesting is what this administration is proposing so much of the time, be it from deportations of, American citizens with no criminal records, or we're going to slash Medicaid. Sometimes often I have to remember what is happening today. Oh, today that's actually illegal, but they can't take $50,000 that has been already given to South Coast Rep. However, what he is indicating, what the administration is indicating, is that in 2026, there's not going to be any arts funding altogether, which also may not come to pass if we call and make a stink. So, yeah, it's almost like my husband Brad has been, and I've gotten better too. Like, you read these things, you get triggered, you think it's a done deal, like all of his executive orders.
Right.
And then you learn more about sort of the legality of it or the illegality. Our courts are doing their thing. He's never going to comply. He's a mob boss. Why would he comply? It's his whole life.
Yeah. And you talk about Medicaid also. And when that first budget reconciliation bill got passed, a lot of people were like, well, that's it. They're gutting Medicaid and it's over, but it's not. And we're fighting for that right now. And so effectively, I'll say that there's a lot of Republicans who have backed off, and now the timeline has been pushed back. Mike Johnson is saying that he is probably not going to get it to a floor vote until after Memorial Day, and that's because of all the pushback that we've been doing. So yeah.
Yeah, what I've learned about all the and I'll call myself out on this. I mean, I feel like many people that I know, before 2016, I always voted. I often worked for campaigns, but then I just sort of go back to my life,
Sure.
And then I think what, the reason that from the Heritage Foundation to all the, basically when Roe v. Wade passed in 1973, there was like a whole bunch of people that are now having their moment that wanted to repeal that, and they worked night and day. So I think I'm working night and day, I mean, it's a long haul, so I'm not going to burn myself out, but I think it's a constant thing. I was actually talking to a young, 23-year-old guy who started something called elected.org, which is to support people running for office, specifically young people. Like, what is it? How do you do all the stuff that you had to learn? Mm-hmm. And he also said that, that the GOP side, you wouldn't have a regional office like disband entirely. You might have a skeletal crew, but the idea is like, it's always, rather than like, the Democrats would sort of go away for 6 months and then have to restart the engine. So I think that most of us are engaged in one way or another most of the time. Although, I was with somebody the other day, wonderful actor, really impassioned, very progressive politics, from LA. I can't remember where he lived, but I was like, so who's your rep? And he's like, he didn't know. I was like, dude, put your zip code in. You'll find out in about 20 seconds. So I think just making sure everybody's activated in that way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the point of what we hope to do on this show is let people know that, we're in this for the long haul. The work of an activist needs to be a practice, like a daily practice. It's where the Practivist comes from. And also the practical aspect of it. So, like you said, we all have jobs and lives and families and things that, we're passionate about, and hobbies and stuff outside of this work. And that's great. We need that. We need to foster that balance and joy in our lives. That's revolutionary. But as long as we're making sure that we're doing something and making our activism and the work of a citizen a practice in our lives too, then we find that balance. That's what we're going to do, because this is the long haul, as they say. And I have a lot of hope for the future. And for me, like you said, seeing everyone out in the streets, seeing, the protests get larger, not starting to fizzle, but every other week there's a new one and it's even bigger. That means we're on the right track. So,
I agree. And I also think it's, on some very deep kind of cultural evolutionary level, I will say that in a lot of different ways, we are being asked to think bigger and wider. I'm reading this book, not to bring Israel into it, but I kind of studiously I'm just learning all the time. It's like, not like I'm an expert, but this book by this, it's called Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza. And it's this wonderful writer who's, I think, a very well-known Jewish writer. And just talking about, I myself am a victim sometimes and I'm a perpetrator sometimes, and I think when we get stuck as a nationality or as a, he's obviously talking about to his Jewish brethren. It's like, we can't always say we're good and you're bad, or you're, just to really,
human nature wants to make everything so black and white all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, if I find out somebody votes different than me or has a different viewpoint on something, it's to my detriment to not engage. Now, I do feel like there's some ground rules, which is like mutual respect. And, I think the Jan 6 stuff was so startling because it's like, oh, are we just going to kill each other now? Are we just we're not going to be held accountable for being violent? And, and yet still it's like, okay, how can I keep thinking about like, our country needs a good mediator, some sort, just like if there's two parties and they're just really at an impasse.
We're back in preschool again with needing someone to step in and
even and again, I don't have any, it's not really my nature to judge other people or like, but I do, people that I really, really love will say sort of on Facebook, if you voted for Trump, I don't want to be friends with you ever again. And I'm like, in my heart of hearts, it's like, we can't afford to live that way. Yeah. I can't afford to live that way. We need all hands on deck, and again, it's like, as we sort of parse through how to be a civil society, which obviously this regime does not want us to be civil, they would love a civil war. So it's almost like a revolutionary act to be respectful and joyful and hopeful, right? But so I it's not like, oh, like roll over and do nothing, but it's like I do think that the more we dig in, us and them, the less productive it ultimately will be.
I agree. We have to do all of the immediate work that is in front of us to push back. We have to do the strategic work that we need to win the midterms and get the speaker gavel back in 26. But we also need to do the long-term work of bridging these divides, of healing these huge rifts in our country and figuring out how we can foster more of that common ground. And I'll take it back to where we started and why I've been excited to have you on the show. I think the best way we can do that is through the arts and storytellers, because that's the thing that consistently breaks through all of these silos that we find ourselves in. So I appreciate everything that you do, both in the arts, both as a storyteller and here on the ground. I'll ask you one more question before you go off and save funding for the arts.
It'll just be like 20 minutes, no biggie.
Just a quick call, like, hey, will you save the funding? Yeah, got you, Amy. Thanks. What's giving you hope right now?
So many things. What's giving me hope is, like I said, all the people that are showing up in so many different ways. I know like we're big on Tesla takedowns, but I went to one in Georgetown, DC, and it was raining, and there was still a whole bunch of people, and it's a dance party, which I actually want to bring to Pasadena. What's giving me hope is sort of, I just feel really honored to be alive on the planet right now. And I feel like it's so hard. It is not, I think, at all what, I just was naive and I thought things were going in a certain way and they weren't. But but I think that getting to know and working on George Whiteside's campaign, or knowing Jamie or Eric Swalwell, like knowing these real warm-hearted fighters, when people are freaked out, or I'm back in LA, it's like nobody's doing anything. It's like they are. There's great, like Melanie Sansbury in New Mexico, like these, like, how when you're scrolling and it's like, wow, that person is so authentic and so funny, or the representative with the baby on her hip, like we're seeing these images. I think what gives me hope sometimes is the thing that goes through my head sometimes is like, we need a new language, right? Because language has sort of been weaponized, and social media in some ways has run its course. It's going to be around for a while, right? But then you see something, and the Revival Resistance Choir gives me a lot of hope. Valerie Kaur and the Revolutionary Love Project, if you don't know her, she's a buddy of mine. Lots of little points of light, and then sharing them together. Sometimes people my age will say, like, the young people are going to solve it. And I was like, oh my God, it happened on my watch. Like, no, they get to be, I don't know. Like, I remember when my parents, I think my kids were much younger and my parents were lawyers. I remember when Citizens United went down and they're like, oy, this is bad. And I'm like, whatever,
Right.
And there are these things that, like, oh, it really set up the world where Elon Musk can buy an election for $270 million,
Fairness Doctrine, and then Citizens United. You had Fox coming up, and now unlimited money from these oligarchs, and
right.
It
and
was
then you have
the 1-2 punch.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I do have, sometimes I'll, like all of us, I'll sort of be more or less able to tolerate challenging news. Like I had a day last week where I'm only going to read the news stuff that's cheerful to me. It's like, oh, that's great. Oh, it's like I can't tell.
That's self-care. That's good.
I'll be listening to something that's really challenging. And I had this thought. I was like, okay, I'm going to pretend that I'm in a doctor's office and I'm getting information and it's not a good diagnosis, but keep your wits about you. Like, just listen, I'll have to sort of because then it helps me stay cognitively engaged and not just react and fall apart. It's like, let me just understand,
I think I don't know what it is about me. I think I have the ability to do that pretty well, but I work in this space. So my work all day long is to basically do everything that I can to push back and to help win. I also, I don't know if I talked to you about this, probably not. I will soon too. I'll reach out, but I'm now running Blue Wave California, which is, focused on taking back the House and winning, keeping elected the folks that we just elected, like George and Adam Gray and Derek Tran and Dave Min, but also flipping 3 more seats here in California. So I'm doing that work all day long. So I really do. It's kind of like my 9 to 5. And then at the end of the day, I have this ability to just switch it off and not turn on the news and watch something fun with Melinda or whatever, or focus. My daughter's about to graduate from college, and really focus on the family stuff and not get wrapped up in the horror of all of it,
Jessica Yellen, who's somebody I really like, interviewed, I think he runs the ACLU, and they went to college together, and I jumped on to like a webinar thing. And he was, she said, like all these terrible things are happening. And he said, well, yeah, but we won this case and this case and da-da-da. And everything he said was very cheering. And she said, she said, wow, this is actually making me feel better talking to you. And he said exactly the same thing. He said, I think it's harder when you're outside of it. Like, we're just all day, every day working on the problem, and there's lots of successes, right?
Yeah.
They may or may not make the headlines, but I just really appreciate him saying that. It's like, oh yeah, we're in it, we're doing it. And, no, and I mean, the other thing too is that, and I do think this is maybe part of this, conversation, what you and Jess are doing, that I think to be really have self-knowledge for each one of us, like, what can I contribute and what do I like to contribute, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am an empath. I feel it in my fucking gut.
Melinda
actor,
is too.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I gotta sort of know that and take care of that. But then I also get to create from that space, and there's all sorts of cool things about that.
Mm-hmm.
But and like, I'm on, various and sundry groups, like we all are. And I'm on one, and these, not all women, but a lot of women, and they are like CEOs, and and they're awesome. But I realized, like, oh, I'm not really a strategist. Like, it's not that I'm unwise about strategy, but I don't really love the chess playing, but you figure it out and then I'll sell it.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. I get that. And
it's just different skills.
Everyone has different things. Some people want to be in the lead. Some people want to really think about messaging. Some people are strategists, and some people are just like, I'm freaked out. I know that I'm going to feel better if I do something. So just give me something to do and I'll go do it. Yeah.
There was, and I know we got to go, but I got to give a shout out to, I don't even know who it was, but I felt like it was an angel. So I was in last week or 2 weeks ago. I was, alone in my rental in DC, and I was doom scrolling. There's no other way to put it. And I couldn't stop. I mean, it was just like eating a big bag of Lay's. I was like, oh my God. And then this, then the algorithm
really
being what
stale,
it is.
like dry.
Feeding me more terrible things.
Yeah.
And then this guy comes up in my feed. I don't know who he is. Like, really sweet redheaded dude, like 30s, 40s. And he literally was like, hey, if you're doom scrolling, can you stop and listen to this for a minute? And I was like, oh my God, it's God. It's literally God. And he literally was like, there's a lot of upsetting things going on, but I'm here to remind you, there's so many people working to keep you safe, working to make things better. There really are. And maybe this can be the last thing you hear before you turn off the phone. I mean, I was so, obviously I turned off my phone, went to bed, but I was so moved. Like, that is what he was called upon to do. And it was super effing useful. He's like, I know, let me put a little voice of love and sanity. So I don't know. I feel like everybody's kind of stepping up in whatever way they can. I
love that. And my big takeaway from that is that God is a ginger. So God was a ginger dude. By the way, I feel like this is some weird like rom-com thing. Like, I'll be like, who is that man that just showed up? Yeah. Then you bump into each other in the street.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, so much for taking the time. It's just great to see you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for doing this.
All right, Steve. So do we have any phone calls? Did anyone send us any pictures or anything that we want to share with our audience this week about great sort of engagement out in the field?
Yes, Jess, as a matter of fact, not only did people contact us by sending us an email at hello@practivistpod.com, but they also called in and left us a message at our call-in number, 818-824-4286. So first we'll show the message from, this one came from Emily, in Seattle, Washington. And, she sent a couple of pictures from the May Day protest that she attended, which was really great. And she's got a sign right there. You'll see it on YouTube, but it says, "Courage is contagious. We rise together." And behind her, there's a little Smokey Bear sign that says, "Only you can prevent fascism," which I also love. And then there's a big group photo with a Free Kilmar sign too, which is really impactful and so great to see the May Day protests and all the protests and how everything has just been building. And Amy and I were just talking about this on the interview, how every time it's been building, not waning, not dissipating, but building week after week is really, really hopeful. So,
yeah. Yeah, and they're like all the time. I feel like there's I go sometimes online and I'm like, oh, look at that. There's another protest. Like people are just having them now as regular things, which I think is great. And we've heard readers call in about that before, viewers call in about that before. So yeah, it's cool. That's great.
All right. Yes, we do have a call also from, this one's coming in from Denver. And let's take a listen.
Hi, thanks for everything that you both do. I'm from the East Coast, but I'm located in Denver. And I wanted to say that in addition to staying active through boycotts, protests, calling my reps, pushing back against corporate overreach, Tesla takedowns, and so many other actions, I'm developing a blue-coded podcast with my sister as part of a broader strategy to protect liberal democracy. And so by blue-coded, that means it's not overtly political, but democratic values are woven into it, specifically to create content for younger audiences that don't engage politically, but nonetheless deserve a need to hear liberal values, and so we're especially focused on countering the rise of the womanosphere and the tradwife trend, for example, by offering compelling, culturally relevant alternatives and pushing back against the authoritarian coded narrative through storytelling, cultural commentary, and genuine connection. We get us power, and we're building it to last, and we think that we have something to add. Thanks again for the work you guys are doing.
That goes kind of right with the work that you're doing in DC right now and bringing in not necessarily political content creators. I love the blue-coded thing.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, this is exactly what we've been talking about, is that we, as much as you and I have a political podcast, what we really need is this kind of thing. These blue-coded things. These are just lifestyle podcasts, or just, apparently Joe Rogan spends a good part of his podcast just like shooting the shit and talking about wrestlers' legs, or I don't know what he talks about. I don't listen to him, but it's not political mostly. And then every once in a while,
Joe Rogan
he drops
is not a political podcast.
Right. No, not at all. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. But he's got enormous political clout, and we all know he's right-leaning or right-wing, but that's not what people probably go to him for mostly. And that's what this person was just talking about also, like a podcast where you get to hear these values woven into things that actually have nothing to do with politics. And that's what we need the most. Because most people do not want to hear about politics right now. But they will listen to your podcast about something else and maybe just hear, if you just kind of, as someone called it at downstairs at our thing, microdosing your content with a little bit of just left-wing stuff in there. So I think that's great. Thank you for doing that.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for calling in and letting us know about it. And we'll make sure that we amplify it once you launch it with your sister.
Yeah. 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 Good stuff.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget that all of the links for our actions are in our show notes, so don't just listen, click those links and take action. Please do subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple, YouTube, or wherever you may find us. And share our show with your friends and family. Make sure they are taking action too. If you're able to support our show on Substack, we'd be very grateful for that. You will also get an ad-free version of our show as a special bonus. We will be back next week with some more Practivist Pods. So until then, don't forget, hope is in action.